G'day and welcome back to Project Twin VNT. The last episode ended with a naked engine ready to be removed and a brand new load leveler to make that possible. So the next step is to remove the engine and gearbox.
The next step was going to be to remove the engine and gearbox. However, it's going to be a lot easier to run the turbo lines,
By which I mean oil lines.
while the engine is off the car. To do that, I need to know where the turbos are going to sit, and to know that, I need to know what else is in the way. So, I'm going to mount the turbos to this car.
For that, I'll need some flanges. Here's a little backstory on those.
I had these flanges made up from a drawing I found on the internet, so I have no idea whether they're going to fit or not.
This is genuinely the first time I've trial fitted them.
10 points for the internet.
Anyway, back to the bench. I'm going to build up the shape with some shed 40 bends, or steam pipe as some people call it. They're just a little bit too long for the center line of the exhaust ports, so I'll just trim a little bit off and then reinstate the bevel. Remove all the burrs from the inside, and then clean the edges up, ready for welding. Shiny. Similarly, prepare the face of the flange plate and the inside. Tack them on from the inside to make sure the holes line up, and then tack the rest of it together. Trial fit them on the car. Eyeball the turbos, and then tack the flange on. With the turbos now bolted up, I'm able to move them around into the position I want. The key is to make slight adjustments without snapping the tacks off and having to start again. That looks pretty good.
The turbos are now sitting in approximately the right spot, but unfortunately there's a bit of a manifold leak. So what I need is some way of bolting the turbo flange to the manifold flange so that it stays in the same place when I cut the tacks off.
I've changed my mind.
I was hoping to avoid having to rotate the turbos, and not just because I couldn't be bothered, or because I'd have to move the actuator. I'll be doing that anyway. But they're going to fit a lot more neatly into the space if I do. When fitting any turbo, the oil inlet port has to always point upwards, so that's how I've fitted it. But these are going to package a lot more neatly if I can put them down here. What that means is I then have to rotate the center of the turbo within the turbine housing. On a non-variable turbo, like this one, rotating the housing is as easy as loosening off this clamp. But a VNT has this master tab that gets in the way when you start spinning it around. When I tried to do this on the 2.8, I found that the vane tabs weren't equally spaced around the circle, so I couldn't spin the unison ring. Luckily, I needed about 120 degrees of rotation, so I was able to just undo these 3 Allen keys and spin the whole lot around. But I have no idea what I'm going to find inside these 2 new turbos. It might be just as easy, or it might be impossible. Also, I only want about 30 degrees. Here's a quick demonstration of how a variable vane turbo works. What you can see here is what I'm going to call the vane tabs, all connected by the unison ring, and you can see the vanes sticking out at the bottom. Now flipped over, you can get a better look at the vanes. This is in the closed position or small turbo mode. The vanes are directing the gas tangentially or around the turbine wheel, which allows a low flow rate to create high shaft speeds. As more gas is produced at higher RPM, this eventually becomes either too restrictive or creates too much boost, what some people call overboost, and the vanes open as such. This is big turbo mode. The gas is directed in a more radial direction, or towards the center of the shaft, allowing the high flow rate of gas to escape while still transmitting adequate power to the compressor. It's now apparent that I can't do what I did with the 2.8, because these 3 holes aren't equally spaced around this circle, and 120 degrees is too much anyway. But the vane tabs are, so all I'm going to do is lift off this unison ring and move it round 1 slot, which is exactly the 30 degrees I need. This slotted spring pin locates the master tab halfway between 2 slave tabs by nesting in this hole here. I'll have to remove it as it doesn't line up anymore, and then reset the position of the master tab, like so. Apply light pressure and rotate until it sits on a limit screw instead of binding up inside. Then tighten everything up again and trial fit them to the manifolds.
I'm not having as much luck as I did last time with the guess and tack method, so I'm going to make a bracket.
And here's the parts list. Some 75mm equal angle, 2 bits of square tube that telescope inside one another, some M10 by 1 threaded adapters, and some standard M10 threaded rod. First, cut a piece of angle, in slow motion of course, and then drill some holes in the square tube. Weld the M10 fine adapters onto the M10 rod, and then put it all together. This is the main part of the arm, and allows me to slew the turbo from side to side. This is the telescoping part, which allows me to change the length of the arm. There's an M6 thread tapped in this hole, which allows me to clamp the telescoping part in place. This is a gecko. And this piece of threaded rod allows me to position the turbo vertically. And there we have it. I've used the M10 by 1 adapter because it screws directly into the oil inlet port of the turbo, which means no matter how I position them, it will always remain vertical. That's not quite right. That's better. And yes, it does clear the alternator too.
Now I've got the turbos hanging in rough to the right spot. I've tightened up all the adjustment bolts, so hopefully when I pull them out, they shouldn't move around too much. They didn't, so now I need a piece to fill in this gap here.
Something like this one. I'll just squeeze it into place. That fits quite nicely. And then mark around the edge. Now remove the turbo, making sure to drop as many tools as possible. There's the line I marked earlier, and there it is roughed out with the grinder. Just tidy it up with the die grinder, and then I think we're ready to weld this baby up. After adding a few more tacks to keep everything in place, cut the flange plate off and fully weld around. Once again, tack the flange plate on from the inside to align the holes. This will also mean that the already welded manifold can act as a stiffener to the flange plate and prevent warping while I fully weld around on the other side. I reckon that doesn't look half bad. So let's stick them on the car and have a squiz. That'll do for episode 2. I've got the turbos mounted on a nice solid manifold each, all attached to the engine that's still in the wrong car. Thanks for watching. Finally.